Welcome to today's episode where I'll be discussing with my guest on the topic of why every man should be feminist. As humanitarians, we should always seek equality between humans, regardless of their age, gender, race, color, or ethnicity. The question that comes to mind, though, is who in their right mind wouldn't want equality? Well, that explains why we're still talking about this as we continue to live in a patriarchy world. Today, I'm joined by the CEO of Man Up Initiative, an organization that aims to challenge the values of the 21st century man, Temidayo Saraki. Also joining me today is Olatunde Makanjuola, a civil servant working within the public health services in the UK. Most importantly, he's a man keen on equality and fighting injustice. Now you know why I've got these amazing men to talk about why all men should be feminists. Welcome, guys, and thank you so much for joining me today. It's going to be a firecracker, and I'm so excited, really excited. How are you guys doing?
We're fine.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for coming. Let's just clear things up quickly by discussing from your view what your understanding of feminism is. I'll start with you, Temidayo.
For me, my idea of feminism is very simple. I just believe feminism is equality, and that's just men and women having the same opportunities, same rights, same, I would say, experiences as we live our lives. It's only called feminism because women are at a disadvantage and men have the advantage. You know, my idea of feminism is just fighting for equality, gender equality, making sure that everyone has equal opportunity.
That's right. And how about you, Olatunde? What are your views on feminism?
For me, it's similar things. It's gender justice, gender equality. The enemy of feminism is not men, it's patriarchy. We need to get that clear.
100%.
There is a difference between equality and power. Now, patriarchy and the system around it is based on power and dominating, and all human beings should be treated equal. So for me, feminism is about gender justice.
Feminism is about gender justice. And for you, Temidayo, feminism is about equality. Right. So I think that's kind of gives us a very good starting point. So I know you know, Olatunde, your views are strong around why, you know, all men should be feminists. Why do you have this very strong view?
Well, my strong view would probably have emanated from the way I was brought up. In our household growing up, there were no roles that were assigned to boys or separate one for girls. We all did the same things at different days. The same way my mom used to say to me and my brothers that, look, you have to learn how to cook because when you grow up, we don't want you to be held hostage by your prospective wives because you can't cook. Mm. That's the same way our sisters were taught, you need to learn how to wash the car. You need to learn how to drive. So when you're pregnant and you need to go out, you don't have to wait on any man to do things. It's so strange because growing up, yes, I grew up partly here in the UK and partly in Nigeria. When we went back to Nigeria, in my household, we didn't use the word brother or elder. Everybody was called on a name basis. Mm-hmm. You have a point of view, you put it out there. So we were all treated, even my parents, we had discussions at young ages. At 9, I argued against my dad going to a secondary school that he wanted. And my arguments won. So I went to a secondary of my choice. So I've always known equality. So when I see inequality, it grates me badly. And I just feel, I'm not happy with that.
Thank you so much. So Temidayo, I know again, and I've said that you're an activist for men, redefining and shifting values to instill growth. Would you suggest the word feminism has been portrayed in such an extreme way that it scares men to own up to being feminists because they don't want to be labeled as a feminist because of the way the world see it? Would you say that you know, a lot of men don't want to associate themselves with that because they don't want to be labeled?
You kind of took the words out of my mouth in a way with that question. But before that, I actually just want to touch a bit on what Olatunde mentioned. And I think it's so important that a trend I've noticed amongst men, especially men who stand up for rights and equality and whatever it might be, is it always starts from your upbringing. You always hear the same story of, when I was growing up. And that's exactly the same story for me. I grew up with my mom and my 2 sisters. So I was the only male in the household. So it was always a thing of, who's cooking today? Who's doing this today? I never grew up with any sort of idea of gender roles whatsoever. If your parents teach you that men are to wash cars and women are to cook, that's how you're going to grow up, and that's what you're going to teach the people around you. There've been a lot of misconceptions, there've been a lot of extremist views that have turned the idea, not it, but the idea of feminism into something that is men against women, whereas that's not what it is. The average man, on the streets, him hearing feminism he's going to tie it straight to a woman bashing a man or something like that. To him, it's not the idea of, oh, women are disadvantaged in society because we live in such a patriarchal world. So we have to make sure that that's not the case. We have to make sure that women have the same rights as men and the same opportunities as men. No, a lot of guys just see it as, oh, okay, they're going to come and tell us again about how men should be paying on dates or how men should not be paying on dates or whatever it is that it might be. But one thing I always say is a lot of guys don't actually realize, I might be getting ahead of myself here because I don't know what you're going to ask me, but a lot of guys actually don't realize that men need feminism as well, because there are a lot of things that we go through as men that the topic of equality actually solves for us.
And I like the trajectory of where we are going at the moment. So when you say that feminism helps men, what do you mean?
Okay, thank you. So essentially what I mean is there's a lot of issues that men face. Societal pressure, suicide rates at an alarming rate for men. And all of these things kind of boil down to the pressure that is put on you as a man, because society tells you that men are meant to do certain things. So for example,
gender stereotypes.
Exactly, thank you, sir. So for example, the idea of men not being able to share, men not they'll tell you it's not good to cry, or men don't cry, or whatever. And the topic of feminism, equality in all aspects of life kind of helps a young man to understand that, okay, it's okay for me to do these things. There's no such thing as a woman's thing or a man's thing. It's just a thing at the end of it. I feel like also on the side of the man, there's just some things that even we as men don't even understand that it affects us. We don't really notice these things. And that's why conversations like this are so important, because it helps people to actually identify that, oh, actually, this is true. This affects me. Even something as simple as you go out. I go out with my girlfriend all the time. And every time we go out, they give me the bill. Even when she wants to pay, they always give me the bill. Yesterday, or on Thursday rather, we went out and they gave me the bill, and I asked the guy, why didn't you give it to her? Like, who told you I'm paying? That kind of thing. Even though I was just joking, but regardless, things like that kind of add pressure onto young men. There's so much on this, honestly. But I think those are just some of the things that I think about that.
Sorry, just to jump in there. The interesting thing. I mentioned something about gender stereotypes, and it's not just happens in Nigeria. It happens, things like, I hear this thing often, and I hear a guy say, "Oh, I can't come out with you guys tonight because I'm babysitting," and I'm in my head, I'm thinking, you're looking after your own child. You're not babysitting. You're parenting.
Oh wow!
Sorry. And then going back to, this issue about why some men don't want to, where they don't like to identify with, feminism. At times, with everything in life, you've got a spectrum. You've got some people who would take a moderate view, and you have people who would take the extreme view. Now, especially on social media, you hear the things like, oh, Yoruba demons, men are scum. Now, yesterday, I'm on a group where I would say 80% of the members on that forum they live in Nigeria. So I saw a post where a lady said, "Oh, I'm dating a guy who has a daughter. His wife has died. I'm now pregnant, 7 months pregnant. How can I get his daughter out of the picture?"
Wow.
So I shared it in that group, and it was so funny that the people that call themselves feminists were like, horrible human being. But it's, how many times do we hear cases where men won't date a woman who has a child? So literally, they were not addressing the point because it is a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, okay, let's make it a human being. Yes, they're a human being, but the point is, right now, and then why introduce that man's angle that, oh, there are cases where men are. So at times, and then you see some bios on Twitter, I'm an angry feminist. Men are scum. I hate men. Those kind of things at the surface scares people away.
Yeah, so I think clearly there are people, and with everything in life, you would always have people who are extremists, religious, sports. They're just extremists for whatever reason, and you really can't explain why. And I guess the question that I have for you guys both is, given all of these examples that you've given, it's fair to actually call you guys male feminists. The question is, what has been your worst stereotype that you've had to challenge or debunk? Because I'm asking this question because I think it's good to start really thinking about how men can start positioning themselves to challenge things that just don't seem right, things that are just totally against equality, amongst all gender.
For me, the easiest one I always say is the number of times that people tell me that, why do you love cooking so much? Is your wife, can she cook? And I'm like, what's stopping me from cooking? I've got 2 hands. I love, stuff in there. Among guys, when they say, oh, I can't come out tonight because I'm looking after the kids and the missus is going out with her friends. And I'm like, And then they make it into a joke that, oh boy, they take all sorts of.
And do you know what? The truth of the matter is the ones, and I've noticed this, and whether or not I'm wrong or right, I stand to be corrected. I've noticed that with men, most men that actually say that in a group of men, that say, oh, why are you allowing this to happen? They're probably the ones taking the most BS in their homes. I have found that, and I'm not sure why this is a thing amongst the men community. But before we talk about that, it'd be good to hear from Temidayo what he's what's been the most stereotypical thing about being a feminist that you've had to challenge.
I think for me, it's probably just the idea of not being naive about the inequalities that happen in life. I think a lot of people I've found are pretty naive to the fact that in a patriarchal society, men have an advantage on a lot of aspects, and just the idea of fighting against that. I think that's something that I would say I've had to do a lot, and that along with just levels of vulnerability that I feel come with the kind of person I am, I guess, because if I'm pushing for vulnerability, I would say myself that I'm a pretty vulnerable person, so a lot of guys can't really understand that. For example, there was a time I was telling somebody, I don't know if you guys have watched this, and I don't know if I can say the name of this movie, but I watched a movie and it's like an animated film, and I watched it with my girlfriend, and I was at work and I was telling my colleagues, they're all guys, and I was telling them, oh, I watched this movie yesterday, I really loved it, blah, 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 you all should watch it. Someone now told me, he was like, oh, did you dress as a ballerina for Halloween? Should I buy you a tutu? And he was kind of laughing about it, and I was shocked. Usually I would always know what to say in that kind of situation, but I was shocked. So I think it's the freedom I have. I feel free. I don't feel constrained, and just trying to get other people to have or embrace that same freedom has definitely been the most recurring thing in my journey of being a male feminist.
Thanks, guys. So generally speaking, I know you find women in clusters and, talking about so many things. Women generally are open, talk about things to empower each other, find ways to recharge themselves individually, as a wife or as a parent. Obviously, I'm not a man, so I can't really speak for men. But from the little that I know, it doesn't appear that happens. So you will still have, probably one, probably yourself, Olatunde or Temidayo, in a group of 10 men, and you're the only one that is trying to push for the right thing. How do you debunk those conversations?
The easiest way of debunking those is telling, explain, because what we have to understand is that we're dealing with societal, cultural mindsets. And these are mindsets that needs to be unlearned and new ones learned. And the only way, or one of the ways of doing it, is letting these gentlemen know that there's no men cry. It's good for men to hug each other.
That's right.
It's okay for me to say to my male friends, you know what, I love you, without him feeling, oh, I'm hitting on him.
And what is wrong with that?
8-9 years ago, even up to now, when I go into shops, when I'm buying something, I always think, my starting point was, what would the a typical guy will not wear?
Mm-hmm.
So I started buying these colored trousers, pink, red. You know, I don't have the normal charcoal khaki ones. And I used to remember when I wear them to church, people were like, T-Mac, because people call me T-Mac. This color again. Oh, wow. I even had colleagues at work that said, you know what? You wear pink shirts to work. They look so good on you. My wife bought me one like donkey years ago, and it's still in his rack. I'm going to wear it to work. You know, it's so funny. I went out with a group of guys on Saturday. And it was funny, out of the 6 of us there, we were talking, went to this place, we were eating, and somebody said something like, oh, it's funny that 4 of us actually do enjoy cooking. Mm-hmm. And in my head, I was thinking, that's true, and then we started having a go at those two that, guys, you need to get on with the program. Now, I'm sure probably before, it would have been the other way around.
Mm.
So those attitudes, we need to, those stereotypes, as I said, gender stereotypes, caregiving, strength, as Temidayo said earlier on, the biggest rate, the suicide rates, is in men. If men knew that they could talk and share their vulnerability, they wouldn't bottle so much things up that they think the only way out is killing themselves.
We're talking about this vulnerability thing, and I think Temidayo echoed that earlier on as well. What would you say to a man who is fighting that vulnerability and not sure how to be just open and transparent? What would you say to them? Or how would you tell them to deal with that? How would you tell them? What would you say to them to just come out of it and just be vulnerable?
As Temidayo said earlier on, men should understand that we are all human beings. We all have feelings. We all have emotions. We go through good days. We go through bad days. Now, I love this phrase that was a catchphrase for T-Mobile years ago. It's good to talk. Sharing solves things. I went through a period in my life when I was just miserable for different things. And one day I got to my desk at work. It was around 5 o'clock. And I was typing away. Funny enough, all day, my colleague who was sitting next to me kept on asking, Ola, are you okay? And I kept on saying, I'm fine. And I don't know what was it. It was past 5, and most people had left. It was just the 2 of us there. And she turned around and said, you're very quiet today. You're not your usual self. And I started crying.
Oh, wow.
And she was like, she didn't say anything. She just let me finish. And then she said, okay, let's talk. So we started talking. And then she now said, do you know what you're saying you're going through? I have went through this a few years ago. And this is the steps I took to get through it.
So if you hadn't spoken at the time, you wouldn't have gotten the help that you got. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much. Temidayo, got anything else to add to that? Someone who might be struggling with being vulnerable?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I would definitely also start with the idea that it's okay. A lot of men, and again, it goes back to upbringing. A lot of something I find is that a lot of young men today, men my age, have no relationship with their dads. That was me as well for a while up until recently. Now I have a great relationship with my dad. But things like that don't allow young men to be taught what manhood is, and to them, an idea of masculinity is, I'm going through something, I'll deal with it myself. But one thing I always tell people is, as human beings, we don't realize how fragile we are, especially our minds and our mental health. And the idea of bottling things up, eventually you're going to burst and explode. And like you said rightly, perfectly put, it's all about unlearning and relearning, which is literally the bread and butter of everything we do at Man Up. It's all about unlearning the value systems that you believe are right in terms of masculinity, and then picking up the true idea of what masculinity is, which is, accountability, vulnerability, leadership, and all of that. So I think for someone who is bottling things up and struggling with your vulnerability, I think the perfect thing to tell them is that it's okay.
It's okay. Thank you so much, guys. And this actually brings me to my next, it's a paraphrase and I guess the question after. So Temidayo, I was reading on, I went through again your page, and one of the featured men on Man Up Initiative said, Being the best version of yourself means taking away all the stereotypes and norms that we have learned. Now, guys, this is really heavy. This is huge, you know. There is an adage, an African adage that says that when you're being given birth to, at some point you have to rebirth yourself. And that's what I'm hearing him saying here. How easy can it be? Because for some men, they're in their 30s, they're in their 40s, some are in their 50s, and we're saying that they need to really start changing these things. How possible is this realistically?
I think it's so possible. I think it's the levels of how hard it is maybe vary from age group to age group. It's much easier for a younger person than for a person who has been living for 30, 40, 50 years. But I think it's very possible. I would say my dad is a perfect example. My dad is in his 60s, but he's still today being able to understand that, okay, this is something that I did because I have, let me just put quote unquote, prehistoric views on a certain issue. And then he's able to say, okay, I'll do it this way because this is actually the better way to do it. It all just starts and it stems from one, having humility to learn and unlearn, and then having the intentionality to actually say, okay, this is what I'm going to do to maybe have a better relationship with my child, maybe have a better state of my mental health, or for whatever the reason might be. It just takes intentionality to actually do it. And that's the same across all age groups. Just trying to be a true version of yourself. And it's not easy, but I think it's definitely very doable.
Can I just pop in and say something? Now, I totally agree with that point, but there's also something else that we always have to always remember. It's never too old to learn something. I always believe that the day we stop learning is the day we start dying. So
Fair enough.
Age, it's quite interesting that you see, we call them silver surfers in the UK, people over 60 learning computer skills and going to banks and doing things. It's the intentionality. And like you said, Temidayo, the humility in thinking, yeah, what I have, the views I had before were not the right ones. Now I'm willing to change. So for me, there's no right age, because people can pick up bad habits at a young age. I know there's this Yoruba adage that says you can only bend a fish while it is soft, or when it gets hard. If you try and bend it, it will break. There's so many things. It's so funny. I see people in Nigeria, they'll say, they go through all the law breakings and everything, and they get here, they get to London Bridge Station, and they queue up. But when they're, sorry to making it, but when they go back home, they revert back to type.
And I think this brings me to my final question for you guys. Given all that you've said, how can a very African religious man accept the fact that, well, actually it's God and it's just man and woman, we're all the same, and we make this show together, we get it all together, everything is 50-50. How easy is this realistically?
That is going to be another show for you. Let me start with one thing. I will go from the Karl Marx bit that says religion is the opium of the people. And then you go back to Hosea 4:6, for the lack of knowledge, my people perish. Everybody talks about this issue of submission. The husband is the head, the woman is the neck. Now, if you read the Bible very well, I would say Jesus is a feminist. He went to the woman at the well. The woman that was about to be stoned, he told them, whoever hasn't sinned, cast the first stone. Now, the problem is, it's the way, at times, I'm sorry, this might sound stereotypical. A lot of us, so I'll use us, so it includes me, a lot of us from the African descent, when it comes to religion, we just gobble up everything that we're being told from the pulpit, from the perspective, without reading the Bible ourselves and getting an understanding. And we saw that with the election in America, where you had these white evangelicals saying Trump is for God. That's what, you said something about exiting some groups. People were saying, how Trump losing is bad for the Christian faith, and Biden winning was going to unleash so many LGBT laws and things. And I asked, based on what? And that's the problem. A lot of things, I'm sure you guys would have seen that picture of the Benue State governor and the medical doctor and the journalist. The woman still had her face swollen from the beating she got from her husband. And some people feel that the right thing to be done was for the governor to mediate and let the woman, the victim, her abuser, in front of the world.
National TV.
And some people will say, oh, yes, go and pray, go and fast. They bring up all these religion elements into it. It just, to me, I find it sickening.
So my question, thank you so much for alluding to all of that. So my question here is, how does a man, because someone might be watching this and they're so like, they can't even see the light, they can't even see beyond all of this whole religion. It's a patriarchy world, there's a man first and all of that. How can he see past that? I don't know if you want to pick that, Temidayo.
Yeah, I think I love the intro that Olatunde gave, honestly, and I agree with everything you've said. I think a lot of the ideas of God and how God works and how Christianity is, I believe, that Africans are taught, I believe, are false. Truly, I believe that there's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of people preaching what is convenient to them in a particular situation. Growing up, I was always taught that spare the rod, spoil the child. They must beat me. If not, I'm going to be spoiled. That's what I was taught.
Yeah.
Until I went and read that verse for myself. And then I saw in the same verse, it says, careful discipline. So there's such a thing as careless discipline. But a lot of people just go extreme and feel like, okay, the Bible says spare the rod and spoil the child, so I can do whatever I like. And I love also the fact that Olatunde said that Jesus was a feminist, because I feel the same way. Even when it says it's God, then man, then woman, that is not to say that you are better than her. That's not to say that you lord over her. Because as much as it says submit, it also says a man should love the way Christ loved the church. And if you do that, if you do exactly what that passage of scripture says, there's no reason why a woman would not want to submit. And by submit, it's not as if she's submitting her body to you or she's submitting anything. She's submitting to your leadership. And that's what a lot of men don't understand. And again, I think it just goes back to me saying it takes a lot of humility to understand that my way of thinking might be wrong and I need to find a better way or a new way and learn something new that helps not just myself, but helps the people around me as well. Because as a man, if I feel like a woman telling me that she submits to me means that I can do whatever I like, and because she submits to, like a slave, that's not how it works. That's not what marriage is. That's not what a relationship is. It's a partnership, actually. It's a partnership, exactly. And it goes from her, a woman, choosing to submit to your leadership. And our idea of manhood is leadership.
And also, when you're talking about leadership, human beings, we cannot walk in a void. So if a man abdicates his leadership position, let's go back to Adam. God formed Adam and then created Eve from his rib. Well, we could argue this, that, well, if Adam was doing what he should have been doing, Eve wouldn't have the chance to be told by the serpent that, oh, this fruit of life, eat. And he didn't even question it. He ate. And then when God came around to meet them and said, oh, where are you? And he said, oh, I'm hiding because the woman you gave me this thing to eat. Not owning up to his leadership on his responsibility by taking it to eat. Now, going back to the cultural bits that, Joe, you're mentioning. Now, the other problem that we have with that is that we have this thing about never questioning our elders or leaders. So it's like, oh, touch not my anointing. He's your pastor. You can't argue.
I can see Temidayo going, oh no, like this is the whole
remember I said that this is a different discussion. Now, going like what you're saying about that spare the rod, transfer the child, that the president, my own issue with a lot of people, especially people on the pulpit. Another one is when they talk about, oh, if somebody offends you, you need to forgive them 7 times. What they conveniently do, I think it's Luke 17:3-4. They remove the word that says when somebody offends you, they have to show remission. They have to show remorse. And then you can forgive them. They take out that word remorse. So it puts the onus back on you that you must forgive them without them doing the right thing.
And I think, Olatunde, sorry for cutting you, Sean, I think Temidayo did echo that, saying we always pick, human beings tend to pick what favors them. Really conscious of time, guys. I know this conversation, we can carry on for the next hour. And yeah, I don't believe we've done the whole conversation a good justice, but hopefully we've been able to help someone out there who's really struggling with what being a feminist man means and how to really navigate and debunk some of these sort of stereotypical things out there. So thank you so much. And one thing that I'd like everyone to know off the back of this conversation is feminism isn't male bashing. It's literally finding equality amongst all gender. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me today. What are your thoughts on today's episode? Do you agree all men should be feminists, or that everyone, including women, should be feminist? What is the most absurd, and I say absurd, thing that you've heard about being a feminist? Let us know. Leave a comment. If you have any questions or you'd like to hear more about how to come on the show, email us on info@joemaxwellshow.com. And that's it for us today. Thanks for joining.